Obviously, I think, there's always going to be some limitations with Trey. I do think they have been a little bit overblown, in my opinion. Like, I think more of the issues with their defense this year was about who else is on the roster and what they weren't able to do or weren't doing rather than, this all being on Trey. Like, I think he definitely stresses the defense more. Like, it's like taking away some of the suspension cables on a bridge, but the bridge still sucked. So like, that's just kind of what I thought with him. Like, Clint Capella wasn't right for most of the year, in my opinion. Like, I thought he really didn't look like himself until the last couple months of the season. He was really up and down, even along those lines too. That was definitely a big hit for them because he played like a borderline defensive player of the year candidate most of last year, especially after Nate McMillan took over, which was a large reason for why they played pretty solid defense in the playoffs and down the stretch. I think you can also counter too, like, they had Cam Reddish last year was a solid defensive player for them, even, given some of his, well, no, he didn't even play that much last year. What am I talking about? But like, DeAndre Hunter never really got into a rhythm this year. I think, like he still has some real ball holding tendencies on offense, but it's more about like defensively. I'm not really sure what they're doing with him at times. Like, there were multiple points this season where he was getting used like a big at times where he would drop on ball screens and just do a lot of funky stuff that didn't really make sense for why he was drafted and what the purpose of him as a player is.
Right.
I think they rectified some of that as the year went on, but still, like, he's the guy to me, like, they have to figure out what's going on with him next year, like how to get him into better situations on both ends of the court, how to better optimize him when he's out there, because, for a guy that I don't believe they traded up to take him, but I mean, still taking him in the top 5 of the draft, you need to have a better return than this. Just considering this team is past the point of being a rebuilding team. These are the guys you have, at least for now, or at least, even then, like, these are the guys you have now, or, whatever their value ends up being over the next year or two, that's what you're able to work with. So, right now, I mean, I don't imagine that DeAndre Hunter would have awesome value around the league, at least compared to what it looked like, December of last year before he got injured, which is what makes it all the more frustrating too, because he's had like really bright flashes and looked pretty darn good too. It's just about consistency and putting it together. To add on to, like, Bogdan Bogdanovic was not himself for a lot of the year. He looked really good down the stretch, but again, he's going to be 30 next year. Danilo Gallinari took another step back this season, had some really hot moments, but he's getting to a stage even more now where, like, he's gone from you can live with him on defense to he's kind of getting to liability territory. Lou Williams really took a step back. Like, I think the biggest thing that I took away from this last season is just how difficult it is to continue a really good bench. Like, it's not like, I mean, yes, guys took steps back, but also there was just like, I mean, after being on the bench for 1 year, I think a lot of people forget how human it is. Like, these guys don't necessarily, like, they view themselves as wanting to maximize who they are and what they can do. Like, looking at stuff with Cam Reddish, like Chris Kirshner from The Athletic had an article today on the Hawks end of the season and mentioned, like, there was no organizational mandate for Cam Reddish to be played, but Nate McMillan was playing him anyways because he didn't want to, further harm the vibes of the team, for lack of better words, and not remembering the quote. But like, obviously that did not work out. But that's stuff that plays in. Not everyone is content to be a bench player in the NBA. So finding that balance was something, like, I think that's, again, like, you can look backwards and say maybe they should have made a more bold move in the offseason, which, hindsight's 2020. But yeah, so the long story short, they need to really up their top end talent alongside Trey, because who is the second best player on this team? Like, most of the time it's John Collins, in my opinion, but obviously he missed a lot of time this year, was kind of in and out. But yeah, having better wing defense and just having saying smarter offense around him is not the right way to put it, but having better connective players around him, because for a player who is going to be so ball dominant, which that's another thing we can get into for sure, but I think you could really see how detrimental it was to have guys who weren't always capable of capitalizing on what Trey was able to do, or even getting going when he wasn't able to.
Do you think DeAndre Hunter can be that second star next to Trae Young? Because he'll be extension eligible this year up until the day before the start of the season, and then next year he'll be a restricted free agent. So I mean, what do you think they should do there?
In terms of star, like I don't know about star. Like I think DeAndre could be a really nice starter in the NBA. I don't know if I'd see like I mean, given you can go back to last year, and I think if you look at just in the vacuum of last year, like he looked like a guy who was budding as an all star eventually. And
Oh
I
yeah,
don't think that we're that far away from it. But I think the thing is just more can he stay on the court for a whole season is my thing.
that's
Like,
the question.
I mean, it's kind of like again, not to like conflate it to another situation, but it's like TJ Warren when he was in Phoenix. Like, I think TJ Warren played more than 60 games once when he was in Phoenix, and
Hmm.
obviously we saw how good he was when he was able to play a full season in Indiana. But then he gets injured again, and I think I'm kind of in that same point with DeAndre Hunter because I know there were injury concerns about him coming out of Virginia too. And it just really makes you question and wonder, can he be a guy who was capable of being on the court all the time? But that being said, like if you're able to erase that or just like look, without that, I think if he is able, and I mean, he mentioned in his exit interview that he really wants to focus on ball handling, which I think is definitely something he needs to work on because part of the issue right now is like, ideally, like the idea of DeAndre Hunter is somebody who is a three for you, but he's a four offensively. Like he is not a great passer. He's not a great decision maker. His handle isn't really there to take on better wings. So like they need him to be able to develop into playing as more of a three and just developing some of the things that allow him to be more of a threat in the offense outside of just getting a shot off from the mid range. So um, I do think that's definitely possible for him. I wouldn't necessarily call it low hanging fruit, but I mean, just being on the court for 80 games would be a market improvement for him.
Absolutely. Mark, you're discussing these guys like Gallinari and DeAndre Hunter. These guys that they have at the wing position, and I get to looking at them in addition to Gallinari, and I'm a little bit concerned about their depth at those spots. When
Mhm.
they went to Gallinari, like you said, they had a lot of problems hanging with some of those forwards in the league. Actually, a lot of them, because you think of the skill sets of these guys now. It's a lot of floor spacing. A lot of these guys have the skills to be pretty decent ball handlers, pretty decent, offensive players in more ways than one. And Gallinari does have an expiring deal. Only $5 million is guaranteed for next season. So if they cut him by June 29th, they could move on from him and free up that salary. Not that it would help all that much because Trae Young's extension kicks in, so they're still going to be up there in terms of being over the cap and close to the luxury tax. But they do have some good mid-sized salaries that they could combine if they wanted to make a deal, as well as all their first-round picks. So it gets me thinking, if somebody does become available, which, we say that all the time, but it doesn't happen all that often.
Mhm.
But they do have avenues to pursue, what people say is that what Trey needs, which is a secondary star next to him or somebody that can take some of that pressure off of him in the big moments. So they do have avenues to upgrade their roster. So I guess they can take that into the offseason. They do have some hope on that front when it comes to their assets. They are pretty asset heavy. You look at some of their guys coming off the books. Delon Wright is an unrestricted free agent. Kevin Knox is a restricted free agent. And then they do have 2 first-round picks coming up, or actually 1 first-round pick and 1 second. So, I mean, they have assets. It's just all about whether they want to kind of push all their chips in. They might be tempted to do because you do have a guy like Trae Young, which he didn't show it in that past series against Miami, but he is one of the bigger stars in our league. So the opportunity is there for Atlanta if they want to make a deal. It's just all about whether they think that's a viable option at this juncture.